Hey, Amplify You. It's Michelle Abraham here, your host. And today I am so excited. I finally got this dude on our show. Just kidding. Ryan is a great friend of mine. He's just one of the coolest guys ever. And I'm just so happy to share him with you today. So today I've got the behind the mic interview with Ryan Yokome from Soul Wealth Podcast, with one of the most memorable intros on the podcast of any of the podcasts we've ever worked with. You have to go check it out. Make sure you check out Ryan's show, Soul Wealth Podcast. He raps his intro. It's so cool. So welcome, Ryan. Thanks for coming on today.
Hey, Michelle. Thank you for having me. Yeah, I actually have that intro where people will message me and their kids will dance to it in their living room. It's quite funny.
I love it. And I remember how much you struggled to get an intro out of you, and then to have going from struggle to like this amazing rap song that you're not a rapper, like that is just came out so well.
No, it came out. I was having a lot of problems with the intro because I didn't know what I wanted to do with it. I was really struggling. And then I just kind of I actually sat in a meditation and it just came to me instantly. And I started writing in my journal right away, the exact line, the words, the verses. I'm like, this is so good. And I'm like, but I can't rap. I can't sing. So I actually reached out to one of my friends, Monica, and she's a rapper. And I'm like, hey, can you rap this intro for me? Like, I already have the lyrics written. And she's like, yeah, I can. But she goes, you need to do it in your own voice because it's your podcast. I'm like, damn it. So anyways, I did it and it turned out pretty good.
It turned out awesome. And she was right, because I think it wouldn't have been like the same sort of thing if it was someone else doing it, right?
Yeah.
So cool. So now your podcast has been out for almost like 2 years. We're going on 2 years now, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a little over 2 years. Yeah.
Amazing. And your numbers are huge. Like your download numbers are really great. Like over, like, I think we're getting close to 170,000 downloads.
Yeah.
Amazing. Right, yeah. So it's going really well. So tell us, what are some of the things that you think has been contributed to the success of your show so far?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you.
Oh, thank you.
You and everything and your whole team. I mean, honestly, all you guys do, there's absolutely no way I would be at where I'm at with the podcast if it wasn't for you. Because I'm just not good with techie stuff. And I wouldn't have known how to get it out to that many people. And so like everything that you've helped me with, honestly, I'm so grateful, down to like the flow of it, like the tags, the reaching new audiences, like everything. So you, for sure, there's no way I'd be at 170,000 plus downloads if it wasn't for you. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
And then, on my end, like, well, when I created the podcast, to be honest, I didn't know it was going to be. I just knew I wanted to create a podcast because I just wanted to talk about things I was really passionate about and not have any kind of a filter or cap on it. I just wanted to riff. And honestly, I pulled inspiration from Joe Rogan's podcast. And I don't do like 2 to 3 hour episodes, maybe eventually. But I do love how he just riffs authentically and just, there's no filter. And I wanted something like that because I like the sense of freedom you get from that. And so when I did it, I said to myself, we're just going to cut off the beginning and the end and just leave the middle completely unfiltered, no editing. And that's honestly, I think one of the biggest, I don't know if you want to call it a strategy, but one of the biggest benefits of the podcast is people feel it's really authentic and real. And so my audience loves that. They connect with that realness, and it seems to have worked thus far.
Absolutely. I think that's great. I mean, your show, I refer to your show all the time when we're helping people get started and get going, because like this is a very successful show. There's definitely some key things in here, and the authenticity is like huge. Obviously your rap is number 2, but not everyone can pull off a rap. So one of the other things I think that you've done really well was strategically line up with some other people as guests as well. So had you thought about that going into it, or was that something that's just organically happened?
Actually, I had a lot of people that were interested in being on the podcast, as I still do. I get a lot of people that reach out. Actually, I don't think I've ever told you this. Like every single week, multiple people will reach out to be on the podcast. And a lot of it is they've hired someone to get them on podcast. So, it's their team or their person reaching out. And then there's only actually one reason that I wanted to interview people, and that's so I could learn myself. So I look at like my mindset with my podcast is I'm a student. And then all I'm doing is just like, if I see someone that's like really fascinated with what they did with their life or their business or something, I'm like, how did they do that? And I actually want to learn how they did that for myself. And then also like network and connect with them. So I end up like when I do the podcast, it's an interview. I'm like, well, what can I learn from this experience? And then ultimately just sort of like package it through the Soulwell podcast and then share it with others so they can also learn through that experience as well. So very much a student coming into that process. And then ultimately it's pretty cool because the byproduct is they start sharing it with their audience. You know how it works. And then more and more people start to listen to the podcast.
Yeah, it's awesome. And if you go down like at the bottom of iTunes, what I show people a lot of times is that listeners who subscribe to your show, there's a little section there where it says they also subscribe to these shows. And it's funny because you go and look there and every single one of those people have been a guest on your show. So the power of having a guest on your show, then sharing your show out, obviously has worked very well for you because you can see now you have very similar audiences as all the people that have been a guest on your show or you've been on their show. And of course, Chris is the first one. So
my wife's always on.
Yeah. So Chris is Ryan's wife. We're going to have her hopefully on this show coming up soon too. And she has her own podcast. And you guys then also go on to each other's podcasts, which I think is really cool too. Because obviously you guys just have some great chemistry when you can get together and just talk about stuff, right? And I think you've given everyone a really good look into your relationship and what like a really successful relationship should be like, right?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. We just riff. I mean, she has a Goddess Boss podcast, which I know that you help her with as well. And there's a lot of women that come to that because they want more of the feminine energy. Mm-hmm. And then they obviously come to my podcast too. But that's another thing is doing the podcast with my wife has been huge. It's actually the most people, to be honest with you, the highest ranked episodes people like are me doing solo. And then it's me doing an episode with my wife. And then it's me doing interviews with people. Mm-hmm. So I just listened to what people like. And mm-hmm. it's kind of unfiltered because there's a lot of times I sit down with Chris and we're sitting right here in this room. And I said, what do you want to talk about? I don't know. What do you want to talk about? And I said, well, why don't we talk about business and money or spirituality and money? Or why don't we talk about masculine and feminine? Okay, cool. And then we hit record and then we just start to talk. So it's really authentic and real, I think, from that perspective.
I love that. And how cool is it to have like a co-host that's just in the other room and you can just pull her in every once in a while. Let's talk about this today.
Yeah. Well, the truth is, like I said, that's the most amazing thing. And then when like I was saying, when we started this podcast, like I'm so grateful for you, for your guidance and mentorship and coaching, because I truly didn't know what it was going to be. Like even when I first started the podcast, the topics that I was interviewing people on have changed since then. And I didn't really find out what people wanted until I started looking at the numbers. And I just kept doing episodes. And I actually, what kept me going is there's a client of mine that he launched his podcast and he went out and saw Lewis Howes at an event in Vegas. Mm-hmm. And he went up to him and my client was just starting his podcast. And he's like, hey, Lewis, like, what's your best tip for launching a podcast? And Lewis said, don't launch one. And my client's like, what do you mean don't launch one? I just launched one. And he goes, I'm just testing you because he says most people won't make it through their first year consistently uploading episodes. And he says, you won't really see the return on investment on a podcast till it's a year or 2 years or 3 years. And I always remembered that because I'm like, okay, I just got to keep batching, keep uploading episodes and just stay consistent like week after week after week. And it has worked. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, I agree with what Lewis says. And it's interesting. He was testing him on that. And we do see that pod fade, but I think that's the key is having that team behind you too, to keep you going and saying, okay, well, we need an episode from you. Okay, we need an episode from you. Because I think if it was, I know for myself, no, it's okay. It's a good thing because I'm the same way. I have my own team telling me that they need an episode from me because if it was up to me, if I was like, I'll do it next week.
Yeah, totally, right? You just slack on it. Yeah. And then next week becomes a month. Yeah, and then it just goes on and on. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you get that pod fade, right? Where, sometimes we see people in the first 12 episodes. After that, they're like, I don't know what I'm going to say. I've run out of things to do or things to talk about. And that just means that we just got to dig a little deeper and peel that onion back a little bit more and find some more topics or go a little bit wider. I always feel like podcasting is like a kind of a wider net. And then the people that really are attracted to what you're talking about are going to funnel into what you have to offer. So you guys were really successful, I think, with that at the very beginning too, getting people into it. Was it a challenge that you got them into?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, we rolled them into a 5-day challenge. Mm-hmm. And then my thing with podcasting is I love giving value on the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
but I also want to help people, give them like an opportunity to go deeper, either in working with us or free offers or something. So yeah, I think we ran them into like a 5-day challenge that took them to a landing page to opt in with their name and email. And then in the follow-up email, they got access to a private Facebook group. And then we ran the 5-day challenge. And then from the 5-day challenge, we made an offer to a program that people ended up signing up and getting started in. So it worked really well to take someone, like we've had a lot of people join our School of Soul Wealth from the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at the intake form, this is crazy, Michelle. Every single person always says that they found me through my podcast. So the top lead gen source for me is my Soul Wealth podcast, hands down. But where they actually get started as clients is once I get them off the podcast onto my email list. Right. And then from the email list, I'm building a relationship with them. And I mean, we've had a ton of people sign up into our School of Soul Wealth. That's a $10,000 program. Mm-hmm. We've had people get started in our mastermind, which is an $18,000 program. And that all started from them listening to an audio episode on a podcast.
Right. I think that's so cool because they really get to know you and like what kind of person you are, especially because you've got so many shows that it's like you solo shows. And I think that's one of the mistakes that people are doing interviews is that they do too many interviews and not enough of them too. So people, your audience is really craving you. Like you said, your number one episodes are of you, which is, that shows a lot, right? And I think that's how you're easily able to convert people over. So getting them onto your email list first, what's your call to action from the podcast?
So I always seed. So if I know, let's say I want to help them, I have a free offer. It's called it's the 7 money blocks to overcome to become a highly paid coach. Mm-hmm. And that's a 60-minute audio training. So if I know that I'm doing an episode on like spirituality and growing your business and how to do it in a spiritual way where maybe not burnt out and it's more of a flow, then what I would do is I would probably seed that free audio 3 to 4 times throughout the episode, a 20, 30 minute, 40-minute episode. And then I would be directing people like, go to this website or click on the link in the show notes. Like, I'm not afraid to tell people what they need to do and just be direct, like go get access, go click this link, go to this page, you know what I mean? And then they'll actually go sign up. But what I'm doing is people need to hear things like 8 to 12 times before they take action on anything. So I need to like seed it like several times throughout the episode. And then they're like, oh, okay, I should probably go do that. And usually a strategy I do for Instagram is I'll tell them to go follow us on Instagram. And then I say, tag us in your biggest takeaway from this episode and let us know what that was. And then they'll tag us on an Insta story. And then I can share those Insta stories on my account. So they're getting the exposure that they had this takeaway, but it also gives social proof that like people are actually listening to this podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a really good strategy. I like that. And I know one of our mutual clients, Emily Clark, she was also doing something similar to that, where she was doing direct message me on Instagram, and then she was just sending them right to an application to coach with her, which is pretty fantastic. Like, I think one thing you hit on there totally right is people are not being direct enough in their calls to action. It's not like, if you want to come and hang out here, and like in the last 2 seconds of your outro, a lot of people are just going to flip that off and not going to listen to it. So for people who are not 100% sure what the hell seating means, I know what you're talking about, but maybe just explain a little bit about like what seating means and how you do that. Yeah,
so it's really organic. So let's say that I was again talking about something about money mindset, and I could be sharing like, we were just talking about this before we started to air, about how I was bumping up against a limiting belief around my money. And maybe I was sharing how, we had to pay for something that was unexpected and it cost us amount of money. And this is like how I overcame it. And this is something that I actually go a lot deeper into in this audio that I created that's totally for free called How to Become a Highly Paid Coach. And that's something that you can get access to by clicking in the show notes link down below, or you can go to this website. It'll really, really help you. So then what I did to change this money belief, right? Like I just did it. Like you're just
natural in conversation. Yeah,
totally. And it's just like, hey, I'm coming from the perspective that I know this will help people. and not to try and get them signed up necessarily. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just, yeah.
Yeah, I've also seen some people do it well where they're like talking about like a result someone got, right? So, like I just said about Emily getting direct, if we're talking about something on Instagram, that would be a good thing to say. She got great results by having people direct message her on Instagram. And especially if we're trying to do a training on how to get people from Instagram, right? That would be a great way to see that. So by telling, stories of how people have been successful doing those kinds of things. So yeah, that's awesome. Great tip. I love the seeding, and it comes off so naturally too. And it sounds like so organic when you're doing it too. Like it doesn't sound forced. It doesn't sound inauthentic at all.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that we do is we've learned, we've actually had a bit of challenge taking someone from a free podcast to like a $10,000 program because it's such a gap.
Big
right?
gap, yeah.
Yeah. So we kind of put like almost like a jump off point in there. And so sometimes that free offer, we might not enroll them right to a $10,000 program. It might be a $497 one-time call or something like that, or a $97 offer, or we've ran 30-day programs in the past that are $555. And that sort of is like an enticing price point for people can be like, okay, I can justify that. And then what we actually do is once that person is getting good results in the coaching program, then we just typically what we do is we take their smaller investment, like $497 or $1,000 or whatever, and we use that as being able to take it off their first month's payment on the bigger programs. So they're not losing any money; they're just reinvesting into a bigger program. And that kind of like stepping stone is really helpful for us from the free podcast to an actual paid client.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's something people struggle with. Like where do you get people from a free, like, so this conversation I've had with a few people, like, I don't want to give away too much information on my podcast. I'm like, no, you do. You do want to give away lots of information on your podcast. They still work with you, even though you think you've given away everything you have. But it's tricky to go from the free podcast to that. And you guys have found a way of doing that really seamlessly, which is awesome.
Yeah. We figured it took a little while, but we figured it out. And then I think the other thing too is just making sure that the podcast is reaching new people. That's why interviewing other people I found is very effective. Otherwise, just kind of talking to the same people over and over and over. But I don't as much now, I probably should, but I don't as much now. I'm not as vocal with it, like through my own accounts. But when we first started, it's like, you're super vocal everywhere you go to get people on board so you can get it, up enough traction so people are listening to podcasts. Yeah.
That brings up another strategy that we've been talking about lately too, is like bringing up some of those old episodes, like, in iTunes where you can like find out what your most popular episodes are, bringing those episodes back up to the social media and shouting them out again and talking about them, and somehow finding a way to bring them into a conversation that's relevant again. I think that's a really cool way of doing it as well.
Yeah, that works well too. And then like sometimes we hit a wall. We're like, what are we going to talk about? Like I messaged you. I actually messaged you and I said like, I don't know, like I'm not lit up with what do I need to talk about if I'm totally honest? And that was just like a couple, 3 months ago.
Yeah. And so how did you get past that? Like what made you so we call it something called pod fade, where it's like you get so excited about it and then it's like, not so excited about it anymore. Yeah.
Vodka. Cranberry.
Now there's a vodka shot for every show.
I just had to come back to what do I want to talk about that lights me up? Because when you've done episodes for a couple of years, it can get a bit robotic and stale, and you're like, what do I want to talk about? And if I'm totally honest, what I realized is that I was feeling a little stagnant in my own personal life. So I'm like, oh, well, of course, if I have nothing super exciting happening in my own life, then I'm running out of content to share with people because my own life isn't exciting. So I kind of just came back to like, well, what would I like to do in my life? And I came back to the roots on why I started the podcast. And that's honestly like, I love to go deep into conversation with people. So whether it's money or spirituality, business, stuff like that. Of course, I see it in the conspiracy theories, which I think has gotten me into trouble. I need to talk to you about that. So, I think I got kicked off Facebook. Anyways, and then I realized like I actually want to go deep, and I wasn't my challenge was I actually wasn't committing to making the time to do that. It was sort of like fitting in episodes where I could. And so I didn't feel like I was actually being able to go deep because I wasn't committed to carving out the proper time for it. So I was making a priority.
Yeah, and I think too, like with your topic, do you find like you have to be doing more of your own personal development too, in discovering new things personally and in your relationships, and I think maybe like you just ran a huge race, and so that after that race is like, what's the next goal? Like you said, in like your personal life, do you find that kind of plays into it as well?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So if I can talk about things that I'm growing through, it's just teaching moments. They really connect with it too. Yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, when I hit that point and when I messaged you, it's like, what do I want to talk about? I just didn't know on a deeper level what I wanted to talk about. And I think I asked my wife, Chris, I'm like, do you ever feel this way? And she's like, I feel this way all the time, because it's like super feminine. But then it honestly, like, just, this is why it's so powerful for myself and my wife, Chris, to have you as our coach, our podcasting coach. Just by you being there for us and me being able to message that for you helped me get unstuck from that. Instead of holding on to it and be like, how do I figure this out? And then you're like, hey, I'm more than happy to jump on a call and help you out. I'm like, I think we got it. I think we figured this out.
I was like, well, I didn't do anything yet.
So yeah, thank you.
But that's a really good call, just for having coaches in general too, right? Like, I'm sure a lot of your clients feel that way too, like just knowing that you're there and you're on their side and you're there to support them when they have when they're having an issue or getting stuck on something, that you can just message, hey Ryan, I'm stuck.
Yeah, they don't always even need a response from me.
Yeah.
And what's the crazy thing about podcasting is I've had so many people tell me this. I've listened to your podcast for a year. I've listened to your podcast for 2 years, and they're just getting started as a client now. Like I have people, I don't know if this is common with your clients, but I literally have people binge listen episodes. And they're like, I listened to your podcast for an 8-hour drive straight. I was heading to my parents' house. And other people are like, I've never heard you before. And I just binge listened 30 episodes.
That's amazing.
And so that's crazy.
That is crazy. And that is also a really good testament to, like, don't stop podcasting, because those people that 2 years, they've been listening for 2 years and now are jumping in as clients. It takes them a while, right? It's not, it's especially in the personal development space, I think too. Like, I just had this conversation with another mutual friend of ours, Karen Kenny, like, you're, talking about spirituality and talking about personal development. It's not like a quick decision people make. It takes time to be ready for that kind of commitment.
Yeah. They need to hear things like over and over. Like, we had one woman, and I'm not saying anyone should do this, but her story to me is really powerful. She, at the time, was a single mom, 2 kids. She listened to my podcast and Chris's podcast for almost a year, and she knew she wanted to do one of our coaching programs. So she messaged me and she's like, I've been listening to your podcast for a year. I want to do this so bad. Don't have the money. I'm going to figure this out. She literally went to the bank and didn't think she'd get approved for a loan for the program. So she asked her mom to co-sign for her. So her mom and her went to the bank, and she ended up getting approved on her own. She didn't need the co-signer. So she messaged me. She's like, I got approved. You're not going to believe this. It was so empowering to her. And she got started in the program. And like, literally now it's like what's in the last 7 months of us working together, she's like stepped it up in her health. She's given up smoking. She's found a partner that she's like totally madly in love with. It's like her whole life has transformed. And that all started because she listened to the podcast for a year. And I think that's so cool.
That's very cool. And then she took action. Like, that's huge action, right?
Yeah.
Wow. That's so amazing. I love it. So I want to keep talking, but I know I got to let you go. We got clients to see and people to see. And I just am so honored that you spent this time with us today, Ryan. So thank you for coming on with us today. And where can we work with you, find out more information? Obviously, go listen to Soul Wealth Podcast. Binge listen to that sucker. It's so good. I do all the time. But make sure you connect with Ryan. And where else do you want to connect with you?
My website, ryanyokome.com, is the best place to do that. And then in there, you'll see, I think it's under programs or work with me. You'll see that that free audio that I created, which is the 7 money blocks to overcome to become a highly paid coach. You can get that and download it, and actually have a PDF version that's written, and then the audio version as well that you can listen to if you're like a person that's on the go. And then also just like Instagram, I hang out mostly on Instagram. You can connect with me there. And then, the Soul Wealth podcast is a great place to start listening.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much, Ryan, for being with us today, and look forward to seeing you, talking to you again soon.
Thanks, Michelle.